Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polyhedron Claddercast episode 79. I'm Steve Tudor.
I'm John Cage.
And I'm Andy Lewis.
We are yet again a man down. Mr.
Bereft.
Rory Summers is moving house at the moment, so has no internet. So he couldn't join us even if he wanted to.
Does he want
Which
to?
I believe he does actually want to, yeah.
The fool.
We've got under his skin. He's got that addiction going. But unfortunately, he's got a ropey excuse.
Moving house. Seriously.
No commitment, some people. No commitment at all.
Should have set it up and applied for the internet before he moved.
Yeah, we tried that, didn't work.
No, it's true, yeah. I had the same thing. It still took 2 weeks. Bastards.
Yeah. It does mean, though, as a like a nice little teaser for everyone for future episodes, it does mean we'll be having the Dunnell Mill chat when Rory comes back on the show.
The
Kill us
Dunnell
now.
Redux. Outstanding. Everyone loves a bit of Dunnell.
On the subject of house improvementy stuff, our planning permission is finally in. Hurrah!
Excellent. Do you know how long it'll take?
Our architect reckons probably no more than about 8 weeks.
So 6 months then.
I'm going to roll a D100.
Oh, look, critical miss.
61, according to that.
Is that days or weeks?
Ah!
Yes.
Who knows? It's the planning office. It could be one, it could be the other.
I reckon you'll have had a baby before then.
No, I reckon we'll have the planning back before the little one arrives, unless it arrives early. Speaking of the little one, we've had some confirmation. We now know the gender of our little one.
You know what flavour it is? Excellent.
That's right. It's going to be boy flavour.
Boy flavour.
Oh.
So
Congratulations. That's the first I've heard of this, Mr. Cage. Have you just announced this live to the world on the podcast?
yes, there is a bit of that. No, we're not sort of going out of our way to stick it on Facebook or anything, but it's a PHC listener special. So there you go. You heard it here first, probably.
It's going to be a boy meeple. Excellent.
Yep. Not that it changes much, because either way it was going to be inundated with games and D&D, and but it's nice to know because then you can start planning names.
I will buy it. Him. At what point do you stop calling it an it and have a he? Because obviously, is it fully formed as a human yet? I don't know. I'm not a biologist.
Reasonably, yeah.
Okay.
It's got eyelashes and hair and stuff.
They form pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, its skin will stop being transparent fairly soon, which is a bit creepy.
Isn't that just the ultrasound making it transparent, John?
No, in the ultrasound, it's quite nicely opaque, but apparently at the moment, or as of a week ago, it had transparent skin. So if you could see in there optically, you'd be able to see into all of its organs and everything.
Awesome. So it's basically like a MyGo.
Yes.
I don't think John's wife is giving birth to the fungi of your goth somehow, but we never know. I've heard you've had news of a delivery.
I have a different kind of delivery. Mine's slightly less translucent. I have finally, pretty much after everybody on planet Earth and potentially the surrounding solar system, finally received my delivery of On Mars and a few minor add-ons I added during the Pledge Manager.
A few minor add-ons.
Okay, 4 more games.
Yeah, you sent us a photograph of that on your doorstep, and it came up to like the letterbox, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually bigger than the box I had Rising Sun in. Rising Sun currently wins the biggest box, which I got delivered to work. And as soon as it arrived, I immediately regretted it because I thought, how the f*** am I going to get that on the train?
At least you didn't leave that one on the train.
That's true. Learn from his mistakes. No, Mike, this is 2 big boxes. It was definitely at least a half a John in height. Not an exaggeration. It was particularly tall. 2 boxes stacked up. But yes, I went for all 5 of the Eagle Griffin Vital Lacerda games and spent actually an entire day and a half punching them and sorting them.
Oh, God.
Good
You get that
grief.
horrible desiccated finger from the cardboard.
Well, actually, no, because the cardstock in it is incredible.
I thought you were about to say you've got like a special punching thimble or something like that.
No. I have guitarist's fingers. It's okay. They're already calloused and immune to things like that. No, the cardstock in these things, because they're all the sort of the original Kickstarter sort of super duper deluxe versions, as is on Mars. The cardstock in it is honestly, it's about 3 or 4 mil thick. It's thicker than some double thickness player boards that you get. You know, the sort of the ones with you can put components in them like inside. They're actually thicker than that.
Now, is that luxurious or is it overkill?
See, I was wondering that. That's a very good question, John. At what point does super duper nice, tasty, and sexy become, this is a bit silly now, I've just overpaid?
See, I got on Mars as well, and I had a chance to play it. It's all set up on my table. I'm trying to learn how to play it. And there was a point when a couple of the items I thought with that were a bit kind of like, now, is this really super sexy, or is this worth it? And then the meeples in on Mars are a good example, because you've got like 6 different types of meeple, and they've all been coloured and printed. Mm-hmm. So they've got little like icons on them as well. And it's like, I don't need that. I mean, they're very nice.
Yes.
But I'm not quite sure it needs that.
I guess the question is, how much did the game cost, and how much less would it cost if it didn't have components up to quite that bar? Like if it was just a little bit lower.
Those games, you're looking at 100 rips each, aren't you?
Give or
I think
take.
the Sir Eagle Griffin, I think when they come out in retail, they're about £100 each now. Which, and they're good games. What I've played of them, I mean, I haven't managed to play on Mars yet, but what I've seen of them, they're very highly regarded. But there is a part of me like, what could I take out of this to make it 50 quid?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the size of the board's a big one. That on Mars board is absolutely huge. And I do wonder if it needs to be that big.
I wonder if it's suffering from Agra syndrome, because Agra is. I wouldn't say Agra's like the production values of Agra are very, very nice, but they're not quite on the same scale as these Eagle Griffin games. But Agra is physically huge. I think it's far too big for what it needs to be honest, and a little too pim, because it's got that second board, and if you nudge it, everything sort of falls off, which is bloody annoying. Thinking back to it, if you remember, I bought Empire's Age of Discovery a few years ago. Nearly put me back out when I took it off the shelf, because it's also massive.
Yeah.
And that is like a double-depth box. And that's also Eagle Griffin. And it's basically the same sort of level of production. You know, you've got all these literally hundreds of miniatures in there. They're not like super-duper sort of Simon-style miniatures that have all been sexy sculpted. They're all very, very similar and kind of lower quality. Kind of like more, sort of army figures you get when you were younger.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
They're a bit more like that.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, they're all very nice. I mean, all they're doing, they're basically just workers, so you could get away with tokens or even meeples. But you're thinking, it is nice, and there's all these lovely plastic and silver and gold coins. You're thinking, it's all very nice, but to be honest, I could just get away with a bunch of cardboard here. Okay, it's lovely.
So just to reiterate, what did you get in this Kickstarter then? So you got On Mars.
I got On Mars. I got Vinos, Lisboa, The Gallerist, Escape Plan. I got the 5.
Okay, right.
So if those are all approximately 100 quid games, you just spent $500 on board games. Holy shit.
Mathematically, I suppose I did. I'm not going to tell Laura that, but I might ban her from listening to this podcast. But yes.
We can cut that bit out. Don't cut it out, Steve.
Actually, to be honest, I don't think it was quite that much. I think it was for about £500 with shipping, and I paid £94 for the shipping alone. But I think if I remember right, it was about £80 a game, give or take. But I might just be making that up to make myself feel better.
Let's gloss over that. Keep going.
But yes, it's a whole big pile of... And each box is genuinely about the size of the City of Kings. I mean, Steve's got On Mars, so he knows how big these boxes are, and they're all that big.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hefty box. I'm not entirely sure where it's going to fit on my shelves at this point, but yeah, it's a hefty box.
Well, I have discovered, through more maths and, shoving them in, that 4 of them fit perfectly in a single Kallax.
And the Kallax take 4 of them.
Just about. Well, it's also taking TI3, Too Many Bones, Gloomhaven, and Deep Madness with no problem at all. They're well made, those Kallaxes.
That is quite impressive.
But yes, so that's all finally turned up, and at some point this year I might end up getting to play them. Alora's already complained that they're all obviously very, very heavy. There is absolutely no way in hell we're ever actually going to get round to playing them, because she's the only person that'll ever play them with me, locally at least.
I'd play them. You might not want to play them with me.
Do you know what? I reckon you'd be fine. But the thing is, They all say on them, obviously, every game that you buy has an estimated, this will take you, X hours or X minutes per person or whatever it is. And they're always, hugely underestimated. Vinos alone says it'll take somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. And that's on the box. So I reckon that's a 6-hour game right there.
You've got to learn them first as well, because they're not exactly simple and straightforward games, these. I said I tried to learn on Mars at the weekend. I watched Paul Grogan's video once. I read the rule book from cover to cover. Then I set up the game and put Paul's video on the iPad and the rule book. And I think I've worked out 6 of the possible 8 actions you can take, how they work. 2 of them, I'm still haven't a clue. I'm not quite sure what the point is. And then I tried to play a solo. I made it a bit more complicated because I want to learn the rules. So I tried to play it with a solo player and I gave up after that, and then just basically two-handed it. And even then, I got 3 turns in and went, I've actually f***ed up both players here because both of them don't have any resources. And then they're going, when do the resources get refilled? Oh, they don't.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, crap. All right. Okay. That's, I've messed that up.
Interesting. So it is possible for everyone to lose in that game, it sounds like.
It's very, very weird because you don't get points. I don't want to go into too much detail because you don't get much points as you go along, as far as I can work out. Because everything I say from this point is probably completely wrong. As I said, I really don't grab it. But when you usually have a market where you get resources from, that market is finite. You then have to make your own resources. So if you don't build your engine correctly, it seems that you've got to really find a way out of that by doing other things. And I haven't quite worked out the other things. It's one of those things when how learning the strategy is going to be part of learning the game.
Yes.
There's going to be a definite element of that to it. So
CO2's like that. It's a bit on rails to start with, but the actions are kind of fairly straightforward, but how they fit together is the hard bit. Once you get your head round it, it's all right, but getting your head round it is bloody difficult.
Thematically, it makes perfect sense that you could potentially run out of resources and die a cold and lonely death on the red planet.
True.
I quite like the idea that it's entirely possible that everyone could simply just die.
I like that. Miserable.
I
Good.
like that idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, the first player in On Mars is the last person who watched The Martian.
Nice.
Nice. Excellent.
I love that film.
I've never seen it, actually. It's supposed to be very good.
It is excellent. Good. The book was even better, but they really captured most of the book in the film. So
That's well good. That's good.
I think the book got a little bit boring towards the end, though.
I disagree because I really enjoyed it, but
there was a point in the book I think it was about 3/4 of the way through where I was a bit kind of like, right, okay, this is getting into a routine now. He fixes it, he does something goes wrong. He fixes it, he does something goes wrong. And it was at the point when I think it was at the sand dunes. There's a bit when he's in like a rover and he falls down like a sand dune or something. I was just like, oh, for God's sake.
He was so close. Just die now, Mark. Just die now.
It wasn't even that. It was this kind of thing where I was just like a little bit now fed up of all the different things that went wrong. It was just a bit kind of like, for God's sake.
Well, interestingly, they cut that bit and they cut the bit where he decided to go the correct way rather than die horribly because his batteries ran out. Both of those bits they cut from the film. Yeah, it's an excellent book. I'd thoroughly recommend it. And an even better film if you're less patient than Steve. Or as impatient as Steve, I should say.
No, I've read it. I read it all the way through. I just found, I think, watching the film first and then going back to the book, I found that it just felt unnecessary, the bit that they did cut. If that makes sense.
Nice. Well, I have just done some maths in the background, John, and your initial assessment was pretty much spot on.
It often is.
Ooh.
Ouchie.
Yep. 100 rips a game.
Speaking of expensive board games, I got a message from Awakened Realms about Etherfields.
Is this the game you didn't back? Oh, wait, you did?
No, I did back it. I've gone back through. I definitely backed it. And they sent me a message saying, did you know you're currently up for single wave shipping? And I was like, no, not again. Sod it, I'm going to pay the extra £10 and get it so that I can get the first bit sooner, so I can get it before I have my tiny little human, before that robs me of all of my spare time, thinking that it was going to be reasonably quick. And because I was in a rush with loads of other stuff that was going on at work, I thought I'd just get that done, then it's all sorted. I got home, had a look at the date, and it's not going to, the first wave, the first bit of it's not going to arrive until July. So either way, I'm not
If
going
you're
to have
lucky.
any
This is-
time for this anyway.
This is Etherfields, isn't it? Not Tainted Grail.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Have you played the Tainted Grail computer game yet?
No. I'm kind of hesitant to play it.
Okay. I'm just wondering because you will have the chance to play it, whereas you might not have a chance to play the board game.
Yeah. I kind of hate ruining experiences by like shortcutting with a slightly different medium. So
Yeah.
I kind of want to play the board. I know it's going to take me a while to get to it, but I would rather just wait for the board game. I'm quite a patient person. You may have noticed this.
You have to be. Hang around with me.
True. Science fact.
Speaking of computer games of board games, have either of you two played Gloomhaven yet on PC?
I have. I've played one mission on it.
What do you think of it?
Unfortunately, my PC, I've got a laptop and it works, but it's complaining a little bit under the strain. So it's one that it doesn't feel like it's slow. It just feels like one of those games when you click something and there's like a millisecond, 50, 100 millisecond delay, which is just enough a delay for you to go click it again, which means you do everything twice. So
Yes.
it's, yeah. It's like on Mars. I've got we talk about on Mars. We've got the Terraforming Mars on Steam, and that game has no fancy 3D graphics, but is caning my GPU when it's on. It makes the game almost unplayable because everything is just it takes that that slight of a second delay, which means it feels like it's really slow. So yeah, I'm waiting for some money to pay for a new computer. Then I will play Gloomhaven in some more detail.
Tell you what, when everything's turned up full, because I've got a beast of a machine, it looks really good, runs really well. Although it does, my graphics cards do rev up something fierce. It sounds like I got a tornado under my desk.
Is someone hoovering in here?
Yeah, it's pretty good, and you actually feel, because my tower's got a vent at the top to blow hot air through the top, and you can kind of feel it warm kind of around where the keyboard is as all this air comes up from underneath the desk. You think, Jesus, this is getting pretty toasty.
Better strip off again.
Yep, which means again, there's only so far I can go.
Speaking of video games, anyone see the teaser for Baldur's Gate 3?
I've seen a teaser for it a while ago.
I was going to say, wasn't it out a while ago?
That was that was like the first trailer. They've released like a teaser to a teaser kind of thing.
Okay.
So they've just they've shown like a behind the scenes thing. So they've shown like a live orchestra doing the soundtrack and motion capture doing like sword fights and acting and things like that.
Ooh.
And a little minor intro by Volo.
Nice.
Really?
Trip advisor of the Forgotten Realms.
The motion capture stuff, is that for like the CGI bits between the action, or is it for the actual characters in the game?
This must be for the actual character, I think.
That's cool.
I think because this is by Larian Studios, who made the Divinity games, Divinity Original Sin, and those previous games were were full 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if what they're doing is they're basically making Baldur's Gate 3 into a kind of a step between the two. So rather than it being like, because Baldur's Gate was all 2D, it was all pre-rendered. I'm wondering whether they're going to the 3D models and basically using their own engine from the Divinity games into making the next Baldur's Gate game.
Ooh.
Interesting.
They're not going to use a kind of modified Dragon Age engine or anything like that.
I don't see why they would when they've got their own engine from Divinity. So
True. It's probably more advanced as well.
yeah.
Excellent. We've kind of slipped into the comfortable pants of the news here. Is it worth a jingle?
Speaking of Baldur's Gate, Wizards of the Coast have finally announced what Archetype Entertainment Studios will be doing. Now, a while ago, they announced that Wizards of the Coast announced that they had recruited the head of the original Baldur's Gate development team to work on a new development. Now, bearing in mind that Wizards of the Coast so far basically only make Dungeons and Dragons and Magic, no one was really quite sure what it was going to be, especially as they'd already set up a couple of RPG products. So the same people did the Heroes of Baldur's Gate adventure for 5th edition, and also the Odyssey of the Dragon Lords campaign and the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. But when Wizards of the Coast announced this, they said it will not be linked to D&D or Magic. It'll be something else. Well, they've announced that it is this Archetype Entertainment, is what they've called it. And it is going to be a game development studio, which suggests to me a video game development, working on a new sci-fi game.
Sci-fi RPG, I think I read.
Yes. Story-driven role-playing game that puts the player in the centre of an epic personal narrative with impactful choices. So it suggests a new video game.
Ooh.
Sounds promising.
Which seems a little bit weird as well, because if this is Wizards of the Coast, does that mean they're also doing a tabletop RPG to go with it?
Maybe.
But they don't have their hands full with 5th Ed at the moment, because they're releasing source books, like some kind of Tommy gun.
Maybe they're going to do some sort of clever crossover with those space hippo things that they brought in.
Space hippos?
The GIF.
The GIF.
You're not talking about GIF from Shoop Shiraba?
Nope. No.
No,
GIF.
then GIF. Or was that KIF? That's
That's KIF, you idiot.
KIF.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're crying like a woman.
That's Zat Brannigan.
That's enough of those quotes. Yeah, the GIF are a race of hippos that basically have spaceships and like gunpowder and
They're almost like British Empire period as well. So they're all like well dressed out with monocles and shotguns and
Piff helmets.
Piff helmets.
tally ho, pip pip.
Tally ho, G&T, cup of tea, lovely. I say, Carruthers.
Yeah,
that's from Spelljammer, the GIF, though, isn't it? Spelljammer, the weirdest D&D setting, right? Because it's like, okay, you've got like Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms and I don't know, but okay, a little bit weird. We go to Dark Sun. Then the Spelljammer, which is basically, you want to go between all these D&D worlds, you get on a spaceship and fly between them. But because we don't have technology and it's all magic, well, it's an actual ship.
In space.
Obviously. Yep.
In space, yeah.
Right. But the good thing is, because, in D&D, like every good DM or even bad DM knows, it's just kind of, how does this work? Magic.
If in doubt.
If in doubt, magic. Yeah. An ancient gaming piece has been discovered on Lindesfarn. So, an archaeological dig at Holy Island, or Lindesfarn as it's also known, in Northumberland has unearthed a gaming piece from Gesundheit, or King's Table. Well, I don't actually know how to pronounce it. Nefertal, or Nefertafel, which is an 8th or 9th century game. And have you ever actually seen the picture of this?
Yes. It's like a little blue bead with carvings on it and some sort of spines at the top. Slightly transparent, I think it is. Translucent.
It does look very, very pretty. It looks like an expensive dice from an expensive D&D dice set, I must admit.
It does. Yeah. It looks like a sort of add-on I'd buy on a Kickstarter game.
Yeah, that would have come in the deluxe stretch goals, I reckon.
Exactly. Viking edition.
I don't actually know much about the game itself, King's Table. I've never heard of that one before.
Is it like King's Will crossed with Table Tantrums?
I hope not.
No.
It looks more like Solitaire, to be fair. Like the old chip pieces. It looks like a chess. It's like a gridded board with pawns on it, and you have a set of pawns in the centre and a set of pawns on each edge.
It sort of looks like chess, but they've kind of got the centre of the board the wrong place. So there's like a group of white pawns in a diamond in the centre, and then sort of triangles of black pawns around the outside facing in at them. Like maybe a defending army against an attacking army, that sort of thing.
Interestingly, reading this up, the rules of Nefertafel, or otherwise known as Viking chess, no one actually knows because they were never recorded. So our guess is just as good as anyone else's. That's what I'm saying.
Or just as bad.
Last of all, the thing I wanted to mention was Asmodee Asmodee Entertainment, has recruited Alexanda Theme from Games Workshop. Now, this on its own is not a big deal. Asmodee, hiring someone else. I can imagine they do it all the time. What I find interesting in this is the guy who basically was in charge of licensing out Games Workshop IP. He basically was responsible for selling Games Workshop things to video game companies.
Okay, so he would create Warhammer 40k on Steam and stuff like that.
Well, he released the rights to people like Relic, so they could make Dawn of War and Space Marine and the Blood Bowl game and things like that. So does that mean he's moving to Asmodee to do something similar to things like Pandemic, Arkham Horror?
Interesting, maybe, yeah.
Just rather than developing, we mentioned in the last episode how they were developing the Fantasy Flight Games had closed their own development studio, and we think this means the Mansions of Madness video game may have died. Does this mean his role in Asmodee is licensing manager? Does that mean his role is going to be to license these IPs out to make original video games for them or other things?
That might be pretty cool, actually, because Asmodee are not shy when it comes to games, are they?
No.
That could be pretty cool indeed.
So, here's the question then. If you could pick one IP to make into a video game, and I don't mean make into a video game that's an exact copy of the board game, I mean make an original video game based on the background of the game, what would it be?
Ooh. That is a good question, Steve.
From any computer game?
No, any board game turning into a video game.
Right.
Oh, Deep Madness. Totally.
Ooh, that could work quite well as like a Doom or a...
FPS, yeah, totally. That'd be amazing.
FPS, yeah.
They are. Win.
That's a really good... That's a good shout, that. I love that idea.
I mean, obviously, it'd take an hour to set the thing up once you'd loaded it, but to be true to the board game. But yeah, running around an undersea base with Gribblies everywhere, that'd be amazing. With jam coming out of the walls and fish paste smeared everywhere. Amazing.
It would be a bit like System Shock underwater.
Yes, pretty much, actually.
Could be very good. I really enjoyed that game.
And a bit more shooty. The good thing is, I mean, I've gone through all the stuff with Deep Madness now. Well, I've not played all of the scenarios yet. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the base one. But there's loads in the expansion. But there's a continuing story all the way through, and it's actually quite a good one. So I think actually that thread of story would be really good in the computer game as well. So there you go, Asmodee, acquire Dimension Studios and get on it.
I want Twilight Imperium, the actual 4X video game.
Ooh, that'll be good.
So something like Sins of a Solar Empire or
Sins was very good.
Yeah, something like that, but with all the IP from the
that would be really
Imperium.
cool. Yes, good shout, sir.
All the ones I keep thinking of, there is already a direct link.
We've heard that
Go on.
Go on, Sean.
I was going to say, Too Many Bones would probably make a good one as well. Not necessarily as obviously a dice chucking RPG, but just kind of the environment and running around the countryside trying to as a gear lock, beating up the big bad. I'm not quite sure exactly how mechanically it'd work in a game, but I think that'd be quite a good setting.
You can imagine that as an RPG video game, yeah.
Mm.
The other one is, one that actually is coming. Have you seen the Scythe real-time strategy game?
No.
So the guy who Scythe is based on a bunch of artworks by I want to say a Russian artist, but I can't remember exactly his name.
Yes.
So the artwork and that theme is not owned by Stonemaier. So a video game company are making a game called Iron Harvest, which is a real-time strategy game set in the same universe.
Oh,
interesting.
Kind of like Command and Scythe. Scythe and Conquer.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It looks really, really good as well.
Okay.
I'll tell you what could be good, actually. Galaxy Trucker. So if you had to first build your spaceship and then fly missions and then disassemble your spaceship at the other end to then sell the bits on. Something along those lines.
Kind of like Ropey Elite.
Yeah, I was going to say like a jokey version of Elite. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Except,
would be good.
yeah, and beyond that, it's not just a jokey version. You'd also have to actually build your ship in the first place. And then you'd get it, seen over by a structural engineer who'd say, no, that bit's not safe for space travel. So, you can't use that bit. And shit, I've just used all that money to buy those bits, but I can't actually attach them to my ship. Yeah, it could be fun.
Screw it, we'll fly it anyway.
And then come the meteors and the pirates and the.
I think that could be quite good. That's a good shout, John.
That sounds a really cool, good call. That, yeah.
There we go. We should be in games design, boys.
Games
or IP
licensing.
theft, one of the two.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Right. I think that's enough.
Indeed.
Okay, thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Oh wait, we've got to talk about some games now, haven't we?
Oh right, yes, sorry, games, yeah.
Or game.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna give a little sneak behind the curtain here. We decided ages ago that some of the best conversation when we do the kind of in-depth discussion works best if at least two of us have played the game.
Yeah.
But since I think October, I don't think we've actually very rarely met in person since then. Apart from me and John met a couple times over Christmas, which means we've not played the same game each in months. So we're struggling with a little bit with this part. I think things will settle out a little bit once Rory's finished his move, because Rory's about half an hour away from me now, so he's a lot closer than you guys are, about an hour. So I'm hoping that me and Rory can get a few games in so we can chat a bit more.
I see. We've been ousted, John. That's it. You see this subtle usurping from Summers here.
It doesn't take much, he just has to show willing.
We'll just show up, yeah. It's true.
Exactly. To be fair, it's been partly my fault. We did organise a game day, didn't we? And then, unfortunately, my father-in-law got very ill, and it was last minute. It was like, sorry guys, I need to drive to the hospital.
Yes, it's fine.
I think as excuses go, that's a pretty legitimate one.
It is. We'll let that fly.
The one game we have, two of us have played, but one of us hasn't, because you were going to play it that day, John. I do apologise.
That's all right.
We mentioned Architects of the West Kingdom in the last episode, and me and Andy have both been playing quite a bit of Paladins of the West Kingdom.
Although I should point out, as you've just mentioned, we haven't actually played this together. We've played it independently.
So, now this is a bit more complicated to describe Paladins, because it is a more complicated game than Architects.
It is a damn table hog too.
It is a damn table hog, yes. It's interesting in regard to what you're doing is you've got a whole host of meeples. So all your meeples are colour-coded. They're not colour-coded by player, but they're colour-coded by the task they can do in their role. And so it's largely a worker placement game in which you are, of course, placing your meeples on the board to take an action, but you're limited about which meeples you can put where, because only that coloured meeple can go in that particular slot. Of course, there are some slots that allow any colour. And you basically have two halves of an action board. You've got simple actions and then complicated actions, and the complicated actions do get quite weird because you need to have a certain skill level in one aspect in order to prove your skill level in another aspect.
Yeah, they kind of all feed each other, so you need to get a little chain going. You've got three kind of skills. It's is it faith, hope, and whatever the other one is? Faith, virtue, and strength, something like that.
Yeah, it's strength. It's because military strength. Yeah.
So this is all these actions and things. These are to create a paladin or improve a paladin, or
well, they're to do stuff. And this is where it's quite hard to describe paladins, because everything is about just doing something. So the paladins are actually the deck of cards you have.
Right.
So the paladins are characters, and this leads into a little bit, and I know it sounds a bit weird the way we described it. You have these three attributes, and you start off with these attributes at 0, but you need to have something in these attributes to improve another attribute, if that makes sense.
What are these attributes of?
Faith, strength, and
I think it's virtue.
Yeah, virtue.
They're of a group of paladins that you're trying to improve? Or
No. They're just a track on the left-hand side of your board.
Right, okay. Forget any kind of general, intention in the game.
Right.
There's these 3 tracks.
Yeah.
Right, you need a lot of stuff, right? You need a lot of virtue. Basically, I think the rough premise of the game is that you've set up, or you are setting up a town. A bit like in Architects, where you kind of already have a settlement, you're building buildings. Paladins is kind of, at least my take on it, is that you already have that settlement, and you're kind of building the settlement up, and you're sending people out to do things, like either fending off invaders, sending people out to do God's work, or basically just kicking people out to do various little missions and stuff. So you're not doing anything directly in the town as such. You're kind of just interacting with things around it. And for those tasks, you need to have those 3 attributes. So to say fend off invaders or kidnap them, which is a thing not indoctrinate, what's the word? Convert them.
Yes.
You either need strength to beat them up or faith to obviously convert them. Or if you want to send out a missionary, you need a certain amount of virtue to send out the missionary who goes and does what he thinks, but that will give you some faith, for example. So all of these the complicated actions, anyway, can all kind of feed each other. But in order to do that, if you start the game, because you start with 0 in each of these tracks, the Paladins, the deck that you have, and everyone's deck is basically the same, but you shuffle it once at the start of the game, so everyone's got a different order. You draw 3, you choose one of the 3, and you put one at the top and one at the bottom. So you can kind of plan the future if you're any good. Not that easy, though. and each paladin has a kind of an individual benefit for that particular round, and it will give you a temporary bonus on usually 2 of the 3 tracks for that round. So, for example, you might get a +3 bonus in your strength and 1 in your virtue. So you can use that temporary bonus to do some of the actions on the rest of the board. And then at the end of the round, those temporary bonuses go away, and you pick a different paladin who will give you a different set of bonuses. So part of the skill of the game is balancing the individual kind of one round benefit, like you won't pay money when you convert someone or something like that, against the 2 skills that he'll give you. And the paladin will also give you a few meeples. So you get 6 meeples at the start of each round. You can gain them during the round if you're clever and you chain actions together. So you get a number of these meeples. So you're limited in the number of actions you can do. Certain actions take more meeples than others. Some of them can be broken down into like small actions and big actions. Or you do say you put 1 meeple down, you'll get 1 money. If you put 2 meeples down, you'll get 3 money, for example. Shit like that. And you can perform other actions like building buildings or workshops and things like that, which will allow you to make the bigger actions cheaper. So they cost you less meeples.
Makes sense, yeah.
So there's a bit of an engine builder under there. In fact, there's quite a lot of an engine builder under there as well. But all of this is going on. There's a central board as well. So it's kind of multiplayer solitaire, but there's stuff going on in the middle. And I really like the suspicion.
The suspicion?
Yeah, you can basically be dodgy, like you can in Archetypes, where you can get the black market and you lose virtue. You go down the track. The equivalent of this is like you can have kind of like a Joker meeple. So there's purple meeples. They're basically
the criminals, aren't they?
The criminals. Yes, they're basically you can use them for any purpose. So put a purple meeple on pretty much any spot you like. But in getting a purple meeple, you gain suspicion because you're consorting with the underworld. But in doing so, you basically rob the tax coffers, or potentially rob the tax coffers. You get a little card that's potentially a bonus of 0, 1, or 2 coins. But you keep these purple cards, so the more you have, the more you are likely to get done by the Inquisition later on in the game.
Okay. So similar sorts of mechanics to the...
there's a lot of crossover, yeah. And if you get caught, you get a debt in much the same way as you do in Architects. But yeah, it's really interesting. And what's really cool was that the first time I played as Amanda, I was taking all these prisoners and getting all these suspicion cards. And as I was doing this, I was getting loads of cash out of taxes. Because that's what you do. You get a prisoner and you got some cash. And Amanda was getting really, really annoyed. She's like, oh, you're getting all this cash all the time. I haven't got any cash. And of course, the Inquisition rocks up then and casts me in manacles and screws up, gives me all this debt. She goes, I see. You don't want all that cash, do you? Yep, that's it. It's not for free.
Now, you want some of it. That's part of the skill, actually, is at the start of the round, you basically choose a card which will give you 4 meeples, and you do that in turn order, and then you get your paladin, which will give you 2 meeples. But on these cards, sometimes there's purple meeples, so when you get the card, you've got to weigh up whether you take the card with the purple meeple, because they're obviously very useful, but in doing so, you'll instantly get suspicion. So the fun balance of it is, there's a small amount of coins in the coffers, and the gamble is, do you draw a suspicion card and have the Inquisition bag you? Because you can look around and see, oh, you've got 2 suspicion, you've got 3, I've only got 1. Right, I'm having you. Of course, you draw the card. It's a bit of a gamble as to whether you'll kick off the Inquisition once the coffers run out. But if it does, it's very funny to see your opponent get absolutely done over.
Yeah, it sounds like fun.
It is.
I like those kinds of push your luck sorts of mechanics where everyone's kind of probably got a foot in the door. Everyone's likely to get burned to some extent, and you're just kind of weighing up, is now a good time to risk it on the grounds that everyone else is more likely to get really stuffed?
Yeah, and it does that really well. I mean, what it also does quite well is there's effectively 6 ways of getting points. There's 6 things you can improve. So you can fight the barbarians, you can, as you said, convert the barbarians, you can build structures for your walls, you can place your buildings down, you can place your priests down, and you've got urns, which are supposed to be like your piety, which are these little blue urns that you flip over and put onto something. Yeah. And basically all these things can get you points, and 3 things will get you bonus points. So 3 cards get revealed, which will get you bonus points at the end of the game if you manage to get up to a certain level in these things. So it's got a bit of variation in the game as well. There's 6 different ways in which you can get points, and you won't be able to use all all the different ways, and if someone is going real hell to town on the houses, on the buildings, or the priests, those things got placed on the main board, so they block up spots, which means not everyone can go for them.
Right,
Whereas building your defences or doing your piety, these little blue urns, they're yours. No one can touch them. So there's a bit of a balance there. But as I said, that you have these like public objectives, which you get, I think, like 5, 7, and 9 points for, something, isn't it? Because it's like
something like that.
You should realistically only be able to do one of these things around. So the last one comes in on like the 5 rounds before the end. So you've only got 5 rounds to do the objective, if that makes sense. So after that, there's no more objectives turn up, which is also pretty cool because what that does is it gives you at least something to aim for. Because at the beginning of the game, you're like, I have no idea what to do here. And because when you know the game very well, you probably might ignore one of the strategies or you might go hell for leather on them. But when you start off, at least you've got something, right, if I aim for that, I should be on the right way then. I can build back.
I was going to say, is this a game that rewards going for one goal and targeting that as the thing to do? Or is it more of the point salad where you need fingers in lots of pies just in case one of them goes bad?
Kind of a bit of both, actually.
Okay.
In most of the games I've played, I've only played it a 2-player with Allura, but it works really well as a 2 because it blocks off spots when you're only 2 players, so it reduces the number of things you can put on the board. And it really does work quite well because it is mostly multiplayer solitaire, so it's okay. And I've ended up being able to basically get 2 out of the 3 cards done in a game most times, but it is kind of squeaky bum time when you get towards the end of the game. You've got like 1 or 2 of those to get, and you're like, what's going to come out? Have I got the right paladin? Are you going to block up the spot I need? Things like that. So you kind of ride your luck a little bit, but you should be able to get 1 of them, and you probably can get 2. I'd be very surprised if anyone could get 3, but you never know. But then you balance off, as Steve says, the ability to get some of these, either these urns out or the garrisons out or the workshops out, because you get far enough up these tracks. Not only do you get little bonuses for them, like extra meeples or whatever, but you do get points as well. So you've got to balance off the cost versus whether it's worth doing and whether you get the points for it and stuff. There's this ongoing, do I do that? Do I do that? And you've got to try and think, because somebody might have taken up the spot you want on the board, which allows you to do the thing you needed to do. And then during the game, at the start of each round as well, not only is the objectives that come out, there's also what are called King's Favors, I think they are, which basically allows everyone to do, there's like basically a group action on the board. So the first person can get to it, they'll be able to do it. They're usually quite powerful, but they do come at a cost. Like you'll be able to put 1 meeple down and get 3 other meeples, but it'll either be a specific kind of meeple that you need to use, or it'll give you a debt or something like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it's a reasonably heavy game.
Yes.
BGG reckon it's about 3.6 out of 5, which is, I tend to find if something's about 3, that's at kind of my, generally speaking, my comfort level of a game that I'm going to be able to master reasonably quickly and get my head around. Above 3.5 normally starts to make my head go pop.
Now, I would say with this rules-wise, I don't think it's that difficult, because all it is explaining what all the different actions do. And once you've got your head around this, use a paladin to meet the requirements to do that action, it all falls into place. Then it's all about just optimizing your move, like going for that action which will get you more meeples to do this, to do that. That whole keying in and like chaining things together.
Gotcha.
But it is a bit of a hard tell to begin with, because the way in which these like 6 main actions work is different to a lot of other worker placement games you'll have played. So it does have this little bit of a, well, hang on, how can I do that if I need to have like a strength of 5 in it? Oh, right, I'm supposed to do this action to build up this thing, to build up that thing, to build up that thing. So there's a little bit of a, I need to go around the loop a couple of times with my paladins before I can start going for the main objectives, if that makes sense.
Right, there's quite a long chain of events that need to get lined up.
Yeah, and the learning the strategy of the game is optimizing that little chain, trying to work out what's the best way to do it. And as Andy said, it's a largely multiplayer solitaire, but things happen on the main board. And as I said, the prisoners are the way you can shortcut that, but they come at the cost of you might get nicked.
Yeah. So do you ever find, through a combination of just things that crop up or actions other people unwittingly take, that you're ever like 2/3 the way through this intricate chain of stuff that needs to happen, only to find that you're basically stumped because
Yep.
something random happens and then it completely ruins your game? Or are there ways to kind of pivot?
It doesn't completely ruin your game, it just puts the brakes on it for a couple of minutes. I don't think it's as bad as completely destroying your strategy. What it tends to do is slow you down. Like, for instance, the main board, as I said, you cover up spots on the main board, and when you do, you get a reward for covering that spot. So that spot can only be grabbed once. So if someone else covers up the ability which gets you that extra white worker you needed to do the next chain, you're like, right, how am I going to find a worker to do that now?
Yeah.
But the same happens both ways. When somebody else does that to you, you're doing it to them. And with it, because you're slightly more focused on what you're doing, you're not as aware of it. You don't feel as if someone's done it on purpose.
That was going to be my next question, is can you keep an eye on other people's boards and think, well, they're obviously going to need more of those things, which means it's worth me going out my way to be a dick if I do this.
You could. I wouldn't say you couldn't, because you certainly could, take a space on the board if you know someone's working up to getting lots of meeples or getting more piety or whatever. But I think it would be very difficult to predict exactly what they were trying to do, because there are quite a lot of options. And there's quite a lot of choices on the board for the when you send monks out or build garrisons, basically, is where they go. It's like the wilderness. But once the game goes on, those spaces fill up quite quickly. So it's probably going to be easier to predict what people want later on. Once it's open, it's just a free-for-all. But yeah, I think you probably could. I mean, Laura did it to me a couple of times, although it wasn't deliberate. I suppose if she was paying attention, she might get an idea. But again, because there's 6 things that you can, possibly 7 actually, because you get points for being up on the tracks as well. Because there's so many different ways of actually scoring the points and putting your points together, it'd be very difficult to really derail someone properly.
Okay.
And also not screw your own game as well.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not all about your own game. It's more about how much of a dick you can be to other people. Am I right?
Well, yeah.
Or maybe that's just the way I play.
Possibly. But it is very, very good. And if you played Architects, the iconography and the art and the feel of the game is very, very similar.
It uses all very, very similar art and style, and the basic concepts. You'll get it much quicker if you've already played Architect.
I'd agree with that.
I would say the only problem with it is, although most of the game mechanics feel like they mechanically make sense as you're playing, as we demonstrate at the beginning of this discussion, theme doesn't really tie together amazingly. At least with Architects, I felt like you're making something. You're either building these houses or you're building a cathedral. In Paladins, I didn't really feel like I was Paladins defending against barbarian hordes or something.
No, I agree with that. The theme is definitely weaker.
So the BGG, this is probably the synopsis from the actual game, but the BGG description basically says that you are nobles and you are helping the king discourage the local, what do they say, barbarians and things, basically coming and plundering the nearby towns that are under the king's protection. And it's up to you to organise the paladins, to send out the paladins to defend those outlying regions, make the place a safer place to live, is the gist that I got from what I just skimmed.
It kind of feels
Which
like that. Yeah.
I would have never said you were doing if you... Well, I don't disagree.
Really?
It never feels like you're doing that. Yeah.
Really? Oh, I don't
Because
know.
if you don't if you don't defend against the paladins, you don't like get penalised for them, is it?
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. It's true, actually, because they just kind of hang around politely waiting for it to either be converted or for you to beat them up. Form an orderly queue and see what happens to you. I suppose that's probably true, actually, yeah. It's not... There's no pressure from the game to force you down a particular route. That's true.
It's just a minor thing, I thought.
So most importantly, did you guys enjoy it? And would you recommend people buy it?
Yes and yes.
Yes. Yes and yes.
Okay. And if one was thinking of buying it, how much would it set one back?
I'm guessing about 40 quid.
The best price for Paladins and the West Kingdom at the moment is £37. That's from Chaos Cards.
That sounds about right.
That's from most places, about £37.
Yeah.
So it's actually
About the same as
compared to some
Kickstarter.
prices. Yeah, about the same.
Because, yeah, the pledge for the base... For the game of Paladins on Kickstarter, the pledge was €46.
Apparently, the RRP is 53 quid, though.
Oh, okay.
That's a massive online discount, that is.
It is, yeah. 53, Jesus. I mean, to be fair, there is quite a lot in that little box.
I was
the
just
point
going to
where
say...
it doesn't bloody close.
The 37 quid actually sounds like a pretty good bargain for what sounds like a pretty meaty game with reasonable components that aren't hugely overspec'd, but do the jobs that they need. It looks quite pretty from the pictures I've seen and from what you guys have shown me. So that sounds like a pretty good a good balance, I would say.
I would agree. Yeah, it's a good price for what's in the box. I think 50 is probably pushing it, but 40-ish would be is reasonable. Because it isn't big. It is, it's the same size box as Archetypes. There's a bit more in it, though. There's more meeples. The boards are slightly bigger. So, yeah, it's good.
Very nice.
So because we've not been playing much of late in detail, rather than do some questions, I thought we'd do a discussion topic. Now, this was kind of set my mind in motion based on the questions we had in the last episode. And what happened was, between us recording the last episode and us publishing, me publishing the last episode, I listened to a couple of podcasts where they talked about basically the current state of the current gaming industry. So I basically wanted to just have a little bit of a discussion point, rather than questions, all about what do we think of the current state of tabletop games. But we will generally be talking about board games, because that's the main thing, but we can also talk about RPGs and collectible cards and miniatures if you want. But the main thing I wanted to go is, we keep hearing this question, it's come up on our questions quite a few times. Is the board game industry going to have a bubble burst situation, or is Kickstarter's bubble going to burst? And our response is generally...
Feels like it, yeah.
Probably. The thing is, we've been asked this question now for about 3 years running. And every time we kind of think, there'll be an end to it. But it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
But I genuinely feel this year, in the last 6 months or so, maybe it's just us because we're getting less and less time, but it does feel like things are starting to slow down a bit. And either Kickstarter games are more expensive, we kind of talked about that question last time, but there seems to be less that's exciting us. Maybe we're just getting more cynical.
And more experienced. I think it's less going to be like a bubble that bursts, but more like a bubble that's got a small hole in the side, and it's just gradually deflating a little bit from the...
Like a balloon.
Not as aggressive as that, Steve. More just kind of...
It's possible that we're just heading towards a state of equilibrium rather than a total crash. Because, the industry will always exist in some form or other. And with the number of games, cafes and things opening and also closing, and people are generally getting into board games more these days, I feel. Whenever I start meeting newer people who are into board games, they have no idea, actually, the depth of and the wealth of the various games that are out there. And they get very excited, and then they go off, and we've done it with quite a few friends, either in Bewdley or with friends in Wolverhampton, and they've all really got into it. And I can't imagine that's just an isolated pocket of people. There must be people all around the country that do that. Sure, you guys experience that as well. And there's this initial excitement. They're like, "Oh my god!" And then you show them your Kallax, and they go, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" And of course they get very excited and go off. And I was at a wedding a few months ago, and the bride and groom had actually laid on board games on the tables for later on. And they were proper board games, like Seven Wonders. And I'd bought a few myself, just small ones. I bought High Society, but they'd also put out Game of Thrones. I thought, freaking hell, that's a bit optimistic for a wedding. Jesus, that's hard enough when we're sober. Never mind when we're 7 pints in. But
okay, tell you what, you guys go and have a nice wedding. We'll just be over here for the next N hours.
6, yeah, God, yeah. But there was also obviously lots of kids running around, so Laura spotted a few kids that had opened this box up, and of course they got sticky fingers and stuff. Like, right, we're putting that away now. We don't want Ian's game ruined. So we did a little bit of clean up, but it went down really well. But anyway, we ended up playing High Society, and literally that evening, one of a father and daughter we were playing the game with, they actually bought High Society that night on Amazon. It turned up the following day. They sent me a picture. We've bought it, Andy. It's brilliant. Yes.
Did they buy it in the right language?
They did. There's no language in... Well, apart from the rulebook, obviously, yes. I believe so. I can't imagine they wouldn't.
I'm just saying that we, the PHC crew, have form for ordering games whilst drunk and then discovering that we picked the wrong language.
We've all been there.
No, I was perfectly sober when I ordered the German version of Great Western Trail. I was just trying to save myself £3.
Yeah, nice.
was foolish, I admit it. Yeah, so we keep seeing that, like, I mean, you say this, my friends Chip and Charlie, they've really got into board games, and you can see their board game collection is, like, slowly, steadily growing, you know. And you can see this, like, they can see that, like, initial excitement in their eyes as well, which is pretty cool. One of the things that people say about this bubble, though, everyone keeps referencing the comic book industry. Because in the mid-90s, the comic book industry had a massive crash. Now, after we mentioned this in the last episode, somebody sent me a link, and I'm very sorry, I can't remember who it was sent me a link. Everyone kind of talks about how the comic book crash was due to the over-speculation of the prices.
Okay.
So people were seeing comics were collector's items, so people were buying them, hoping they'd get up in value, which in itself increased the value, which meant you had that kind of like
vicious
tulip
cycle.
bubble, tulip bubble craze, where people were thinking something was going to be worth like hundreds of pounds before it would even come out, kind of thing. So people like pre-ordering first editions of the latest Wolverine comic or something, hoping that in 10 years' time it would be worth £100,000. There's an interesting article on the Washington Examiner, which basically says the crash that wasn't due to this. This was a kind of almost a side effect. But what the crash was due to is that the industry was expanding too quick, which meant that the comic book companies were actually funding the opening of comic book stores.
Right, okay.
Which then meant there was an increased demand for comics because the stores needed to have the comics on the shelves.
But there wasn't actually anyone buying them at the end of it?
Well, yeah, this way it kind of gets to it. It gets to the fact that what the comic book companies were doing was going like, well, why don't we make more comics? So they were making more comics. When I say more comics, it's like, 6 different Batman comics rather than just one Batman comic kind of thing. And it seems that because of the time it takes to draw up, to lay out, and to print a comic, basically the whole system had crashed before anyone realised it had crashed and could actually course correct.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what was happening was they thought there was a bigger demand there than there actually was.
I guess one thing that we're seeing at the moment is that because of something like Kickstarter, that only works because people are actually putting their money where their mouths are. So you can't get to the point where supply is outstripping demand to summit from that perspective.
What I was going to say was, if you take out, I was going to ignore Kickstarter for now, and kind of say, if you ignore that, I can see this happening a little bit in the board game industry. As you said, there's new cafes and shops opening all the time, and there's all these companies making all these new games. There's according to Board Game Geek, it's something ridiculous, like 6,000 to 10,000 new board games come out every year. I mean, there's a bit of duplication in Board Game Geek where it might have like 3 entries for the same different languages for the same game. But even if we take a really conservative approach, it's probably like about 1,000 board games easily that come out every year.
That's a lot. That's 3 a day.
That's a lot. Yeah. And you even have to look at, I'm signed up to Board Game Guru's newsletter. And what they do is they actually list all the games that are coming out each week. So they say, these are all the games coming out this week. And you look at the list and you go, Jesus, it's like 20 games coming out. Yeah, that's a lot. And what we're hearing is that the shops are having trouble with this now, and there seems to be like almost like a quick turnaround. Games are hot and then they're gone because the distributors and shops are having trouble working out what to stock on their shelves. And we're talking about brick and mortar stores more than anything, because of course your online store can have a bit of warehouse space. And I do wonder if that's a similar symptom that what was happening to the comic book industry when they were making more and more comics which weren't selling. We're making loads and loads more new board games which are selling, or are they? I don't know.
Well, even if you've got an online retailer, they've still got to stock things. I mean, they might have a less expensive space to hoard their stuff in, but they've still got to get some idea about costs, about what they need to buy to get in.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult bit, because with the number, if you even as a seller, you go to the cash and carry or whatever the equivalent is for board games. You've got 1,000 games to choose from in a year, for example, plus all of the back catalogue. Which ones do you choose to stick on your shelves? Because if you pick the wrong ones, they're going to be sat there gathering dust because no bugger will buy them. Or you gamble on, I'll go for the latest and greatest, and all of a sudden everyone thinks it's shit and doesn't buy it. And you've just dumped in, a lot of money, and you've just got dead stock, and dead money lying around that you're never going to shift. So it can't be good. And then, of course, I mean, you could face the nice problem where you just can't buy enough of the stuff. But I guess that's the difficult bit. You want a nice problem to have. Oh yeah, we've actually sold out. Brilliant from a stockist's point of view, because you can shift your stock. But then maybe your customers will come and go, oh, they've never got any stocks, rubbish. But I guess that's the same for any shop.
Yes, that's always a gamble for any business, basically, isn't it? And a gamble for any industry. The question is, are we any different? Are we at a point of oversaturation? Is the question.
I feel like I'm relatively saturated with board games. Like, I mean, it's difficult. When you guys lived closer, I think I felt less like this. But because the people I would regularly play the more interesting board games with are now further away, it's more difficult to get them to the table. I don't have someone going, John, come and play board games this Wednesday. Yes, I know there are places I could go and play them, but the people that I would instinctively go with, who I'd look to go and play board games with, rather than just could turn up and play board games with, are less accessible. And so, yeah, I would like to get more games to the table, but it's just harder work to do it now. And so I feel like I keep looking at my board game collection and like we'll go away for a weekend to visit people and I'll be like, yeah, I'd really like to go and play those 4 games. And then I think about actually like run it through my mind, the process of actually trying to introduce those people to any of those games. And it's like, nah, I'll just put Space in the bag. There's also quite a lot of kind of similar levels of games. Maybe it's partly my collection, but there's a lot of sort of repeats on similar themes these days, rather than brand new exciting stuff.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I think
I get what you mean.
That's kind of what I was alluding to before, that maybe we are getting to a saturation point, not necessarily in the number of games coming out, because obviously that's not the case, but in terms of how many ideas can there be. Maybe we're hitting the Hollywood problem where people are just remaking and rehashing rather than actually coming up with new IP.
One of the things you said there, you find it difficult to find the time to play the games you want to play. So in between, when I was talking about last week when I listened to a couple of podcasts, one of them was the Ludology podcast with Gil Hover, and they had Stephen Barnacore as a guest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Stephen Barnacore is a publisher, Gil Hover is a designer, and they were basically saying that their headline was, yeah, we're going to hit some kind of board game recession soon. They can already see the waves where there's too many games coming out and they can't cope. But Gil Hover had an interesting theory, and he basically said there are 3 things that stop you from buying more games, which is lack of time to play them, lack of money to buy new ones, and lack of space to store new ones.
Yeah.
And I gotta admit, I'm about to hit all 3 of them.
I was about to say I'm close to definitely to the space, because I reckon I could probably hit a 200 mark in terms of games, and then I would have no raw room in my Kallax at all. That would be it. There'd be nothing in there. And then the time, I do have time to play games. It's usually me and Alora, and we have a regular board game group once a week. But even then, with 200 games, I play once a week. That's 4 years worth of
4
games.
years?
Assuming you play once a week, which is mental, really, when you think about it in those terms. And of course, we have jobs and holidays and families and crises and goodness knows what else. Money-wise is all right at the moment. I'm in a fairly fortunate position. But at the same time, do I want to buy any more? Can I buy any more? Should I buy any more? Especially because I'm about to go to Kenya for 10 days and probably shouldn't be buying any more games. Things like that, There are priorities in life.
There are. So I'd say there is definitely a 4th part of that equation, and that's lack of worthy opponents.
Yeah, you're right, John. You are no longer worthy.
Bitch.
But you know what? It sounds slightly snobby, but I know what you mean. I think it's because everyone has different tastes, I think, more than anything else. Trying to find, 3, 4, 5 people who have the same taste or will play and sit down with the same games or the same style of games regularly is very difficult. I mean, we found that even with Pandemic Legacy. The 3 of us wanted to play it, but Jesus, it took us 2 years to not get through it. And it's not for want that we didn't want to play it. Yeah, exactly. We literally had to give up because we just didn't have the time. I mean, we blamed Steve for moving first, kicking it all off, but we did struggle. the question of costs of games has been raised quite a few times as well. And I mean, you've alluded to it as well tonight, John, that overproduction, the spiraling costs of especially, has Kickstarter contributed to all of this? I think it probably has, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe not directly, but I think it's afforded companies the luxury of being able to pimp the games up massively when it's not necessarily required. I mean, people will buy it and, they'll lap it up because it looks pretty, but it's not necessary, and it will obviously ultimately spiral to the point where you kind of almost get into like the Premier League and, top flight football, or in the sense that it's clearly not a sustainable model. People are paying literally hundreds of millions of pounds for one player.
Yeah, there's that. I also think, though, that if Kickstarter puts a certain level that people can pay a bit more for, you'll also then find that people's expectations for how pretty a board game has to be gradually creep up. So even the games that don't need, ridiculous miniatures and all the rest of it, sort of manufacturers feel like they have to add a bit more like that to be able to get over the bar for people to then go, oh yeah, that's an exciting new thing.
So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, that you make an expensive game to sell it, and then people expect a more expensive game next time because you've raised the bar very slightly. Yeah, it's cyclical. Yeah. And I genuinely think that's what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, we all looked at it, the Oath Kickstarter. So Leader Games, which is the people who made Root. That Oath game to me looked absolutely fascinating, but then I looked at the price and then added in the postage, and I went, I can't justify that at the moment. So I'm not going to bother. I didn't back Dreadvang Legends last year, a game I still actually really, really want, because it's a very similar vein, actually, to Oath. But I didn't back it because I couldn't afford it at the time. I didn't back the Eclipse 2nd edition Kickstarter. Eclipse is probably my favourite 4X game at the moment. But I looked at the price and went, that's 120 to 150 quid we're looking at all in. That's a bit much for a board game, which at the moment I'm probably going to play like 3 times.
I have actually played the 1st edition about 3 times. I've got all the expansions for it. I've still not played them. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
And so it's feeling a little bit like that at the moment. It's feeling a bit kind of, can I justify that cost?
I remember a couple of years ago when we were talking something that was similar like this, then we remember that we talk about punt territory quite a lot, where if anything's sort of below 25 quid, you're just going to go, that'll do. Why not? Even if it's shit, it's fine. It doesn't matter. And we were thinking, when you get to sort of 40 or 50 quid, you really start thinking about, do I really want to invest in that game? I think that bar is now raised up to 80 to 100 pounds. Partly because...
And punt territory is about 40 quid now.
Yeah, totally, exactly. That's the thing. And it is starting to make, ooh.
We just talked about Paladins and we talked about Architects of the West Kingdom. Those are both punt territory games to me.
Yeah.
Because I worked out, I get both of them, they work out less than 50 quid each if I got them on the Kickstarter. Screw it. Everyone keeps saying how good Architects is, though I haven't played it. Everyone said how good Raiders of the North Sea was, but I haven't played it. But I went, that's a punt. I'm going to take that punt. If I don't like them, I can sell them on, kind of thing.
Yeah. Is it still a punt, though, if lots and lots of people have said these are great games?
There's less risk.
Punt, 'cause it might be for me. There's less risk, yeah. But it's still a bit of a punt game. It used to be you'd play a game, then you go out and buy it.
True.
Now, because of Kickstarter, you really have to, you're buying this on spec. You're buying it off plan. You're looking like you were a house. Now, the weird thing with all this, and we say about like recession and like the board game industry shrinking possibly, Kickstarter screws this all up a little bit. Because Kickstarter tells you how many people want to buy your game. Because that's how many people back your Kickstarter.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. You're just offsetting the risk of production onto the customer rather than taking that risk yourself. And it's obviously the whole point of it. And this is why various companies get accused of maybe taking advantage of that system. But from a business point of view, it's a good model.
I mean, I think somebody said if, as a business, you're an idiot not to use Kickstarter. But as a customer, you're an idiot to use Kickstarter.
I think in a way, not necessarily. I mean, it does depend because you could argue that you could play it a little cagey and see wait for the first flurry of interest to see what happens, and then if the project is basically going to fund, then you could invest in it because you're probably going to get your product at the end of it. But then again, you could just walk into a board game shop and go, I'll have that game, please.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because Jamie Stegmaier has decided to turn his back on Kickstarter, and he's at the point now where his last 2 games, there's been massive complaints that he didn't make enough games. They were more popular than he was expecting. Both Wingspan and Tapestry, everyone was complaining that there was not enough stock for these games when they first came out.
I remember the Wingspan complaints because he only made something like 10,000 copies, whereas Tapestry he made only. Yeah, well, worldwide that's not that many. But for
quite
Tapestry,
a lot of games.
It is, but for Tapestry he made something like 45,000, 50,000 because there's a little number on each box. I've got mine downstairs, and he made something like 4 or 5 times as many. So I'm kind of surprised that there've been so many complaints. I mean, at the end of the day, if the whole thing sells gangbusters, then you're never going to be able to make enough copies. It's one of those things you've got to take an estimate as a business and go, I think I'm going to make 50,000. Bang, done. No, you didn't make enough. You can never please everybody. But from his point of view, it's a nice problem to have.
Yeah, definitely. It's a financially safer way to be, to make too few than too many.
Absolutely. Knowing the demand is there. Again, if you know the demand is there, boom, that's exactly what you want. It's not having the demand. And I suppose that's pretty much where we're going with this, is if a bubble has burst, that demand will start to dry up. It's knowing when, I suppose. Here's a question, though. We're talking about this from seeing all these comments online and getting involved in the discussion and using Kickstarter and stuff. But as gamers and people who actually play games, do you feel, or do we feel, that we are being saturated? Is there too much choice? Do we think that we are comfortable now with our collections? Do we think, actually, I don't really want to buy anymore? I've got the games I want now. I mean, I started looking at my collection the other night thinking, you know what? I'm getting close to pretty much where I want to be. There's a few games I'm probably going to get rid of just because I haven't played them in ages, and maybe get a few more, like 5 at a time, for the Vita Lucerne or whatever. But ultimately, I'm getting to an equilibrium now. Certainly not from, what was it, the people that you mentioned a few podcasts ago, John, that have like 1,000 games in their collection. It's a nice target, but insane in terms of what you'd play and what you'd choose and so on and so forth. I mean, do you guys feel you're kind of hitting a limit now?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said about 5 minutes ago. that I have like a reasonable collection for the sorts of people that I play games with. I would like to play a few more heavy ones, and those are the ones that come to the table less than others. Like I can see on the left of you there, Steve, is Endeavour, and I've played that once, and I really, really enjoyed that game. And I bought a copy, and all I've done so far is punch it and then take it to... I've probably taken it in the car maybe 6 or 7 times to different people's houses to try and get a game out, and it just never happens for me.
Bring it to my house, John. I'll play it.
Good.
Because I have the same problem. I keep looking at Steve's copy and going, I want that.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem as well. I mean, this is now a bigger problem now we live further apart. When we were closer together, you could justify it and go, well, I'm not going to buy that because Andy's got it. I can play it any time I want. I've actually got the opposite problem now. I'm looking at my collection and thinking, well, I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have this. And there is a part of me that's like, I really like these games. I feel as if I should own them kind of thing. But you're right. I have to also realise that owning them does not necessarily mean I'm playing them.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm not playing them.
True. Very true. Which is a problem. I mean, what you need is an Allura who forces you to play them.
Yes, I agree. I do find, though, there have been probably 3 or 4 times in the last 6 months where I've seen someone get really excited about a game, and then I thought, it's kind of tempting, but then I look at my board game shelf and think, but I've already got one that's a bit like it in that way, and another one that's not quite the same, but a bit like it in another way. And I think, is it really different enough to justify buying another one of those? There's definitely more and more games coming out that I think, I think I've already got that game or something very similar to it. And it's not different enough for me to justify putting it on my shelf and staring at it longingly. I've got enough of those already on there. the shelf of shame is big enough as it stands.
Yeah, and I think the unfortunate thing is, which is it's a bit bad news for us, recording a gaming podcast, but unfortunately, I think we'll be buying less new games this year.
Well, that's okay. We can just play the games we've not played for the last 3 years.
True.
Yeah, I think we'll keep
true.
our eyes peeled, but I think it does feel like it's slowing down, certainly from my perspective.
I think all of us, really. I mean, I've backed out of 2 Kickstarter projects in the last 7 days.
What?
I know.
What have you done with Andy?
I know. Andy in sensible shocker. Oath, like Steve's just mentioned, again, I came to the same conclusion. I just looked at it and went, you know what, it just doesn't have the same grab value to me, which is one of the reasons I back the Kickstarters I back, is that they look interesting to me. Oath, I was kind of on the fence with and thought, I'll back it and see what happens. And then, do you know what? No, I was never really that much invested. And I think if you're on the fence, then you should say no.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're basically taking a gamble that you're probably never going to win because you're not actually excited about a game, which I think is helpful. And also, I backed out of. I backed Founders of Rome, another city builder. But having just received Big City, I thought, like you've just said, John, it's probably too similar to a game I've literally just received, and I don't need 2 of them. I think I probably prefer the Roman theme, but ultimately, it's going to be a similar experience. So, sod it, backed out of that. Plus, it was 150 quid. Yeah.
Jesus, how are you still able to afford food, Andy?
Well, cockroaches and things run through the garden now and again. But I didn't buy it. That's the thing. I mean, I don't pay for stuff I can't afford. That's just a fool's game.
Of course.
But especially, I mean, with a big holiday coming up and things like that, it's just silly to do such a thing. I could afford it, but at the end of the day, I drive quite an expensive car, so I kind of need some money to pay for that if and when it goes wrong.
Just shove. You need to get one of the things like on the DeLorean, so that all the board games you don't like, when it turns out you don't like them, you just shove them in the top and use them for fuel.
in the Mr. Fusion.
There you go.
To be honest, there aren't that many games in my collection I don't like anymore, actually. There are very, very few that I've now bought. I think I've whittled them down. There's still, as I say, there's still a few that I need to sell just because I don't play them. But there are very few now that I actually dislike.
Fair enough. So, what's the headline of that 25 minutes of meandering chat we've just had? Is there one? Have we come to a conclusion at all?
Yes, it's close to saturation, but it's not going to be a big pop. It's going to be a kind of fizzle out, I reckon.
I think, in a way, it might be like online poker, because a few years ago, that was huge. And I actually took part in it myself. But after a couple of years, it did start to fizzle out as people just kind of lost interest and moved on. It still exists as a form of entertainment, and people still play. But it's nowhere near as huge as it was, and a lot of companies did lose money on it because, I mean, you saw pretty much any online outlet have their own poker rooms, casino and online casino, because you see the adverts all over the place now. You don't see them so much anymore because of that reason. I suspect board gaming is probably going to go the same way. It'll always have a presence. People like us will always play games, but I think it's going to be less interesting to attract new players.
I don't think it's going to be quite that severe.
Yeah, same.
I think what you're going to do is you're going to see a couple of the smaller publishers disappear. But I think what's going to happen is the bigger publishers are going to course correct, and they're not going to chuck out as many games as they were doing. I think they're going to be a bit more focused. So, I mean, AEG have already announced, and they announced a few months back, late last year, that they're not doing lots of games anymore. They said they were guilty of just spitting out game after game after game. And so they're going to concentrate on like 4 games a year now.
I think that would be a better approach. I remember the article. I think we did discuss it at the time that it's probably preferable to have quality over quantity.
Definitely.
And I think I would prefer, to buy one really good game every few months or every year than 5 mediocre games in 6 months, and then think, well, at the end of this, I need to shift them because it's hassle and wasted money and shelf space I'm not using, and etc. etc. So definitely endorse that approach.
Could you really go like only 4 new board games a year, Andy?
Absolutely not.
Sure?
No. I mean, I haven't received a new game for days.
Yeah. You may have backed out of a couple of Kickstarters, but there's still 50 that you backed this week.
There are about 20 still in the pipe, it has to be said.
Oh my God. You animal.
Anyway, let's draw this to a close, guys, and I think we've come to our vague-ish conclusions on that. So let's end on a high, shall we?
A high.
Thank you very much for listening, folks. We have been Polyhedron Collider. Please give us a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. If you want to chat to us, we are available on Twitter. We're at PolyhedronC. I'm also at Wahofflemadenga.
I am at Sonic H with a 0.
I'm at John_Cage. When Rory bothers to deign us with his presence, he's at Rory J. Summers.
We are also on Facebook and on Board Game Geek with a guild number 2726.
If you fancy a bit of D&D action, you can join us live every Thursday at about 7:30 on twitch.tv/Polyhedron Collider. And eventually, you can rewatch those episodes on youtube.com/user/Polyhedron Collider. Eventually.
Sometime in 2030.
Never say never.
Well, little actually request for feedback actually from the listeners. One of the things we've heard mentioned is people asking for podcast versions of the RPGs. And me and Rory were just chatting about it on Facebook chat last week. So what we might do is when we're going to do a few one-shots, because we're going to finish our D&D campaign soon, and I might have a look at putting them, so they might end up going on this podcast feed. So if you are dead against having like RPG sessions on this podcast feed, let me know. But if you are interested, also let me know. We will they'll be named, so it'll be like Polyhedron Collider episode 79, and then it might be like Call of Cthulhu episode 1. But I'm intrigued as to a way of doing this because quite a few people have asked for it in podcast format rather than just Twitch and YouTube. So,
How do we slice it up?
Yeah, without paying a fortune to Libsyn.
Yes.
If you fancy anything else, there are reviews and news going up on polyhedroncollider.com, which is mainly just Rory. So when he's not here, he's actually working hard doing stuff for the website. So you can have a look at his reviews there. He's just put a review up for the 2 mini games from Alley Cat Games, which are Tinderblocks and
Kitten.
Kitten, is that what it is?
Yeah.
I was going to say something to do with cats.
Kitten. Well, I've got 2 in the pipe as well. I'm going to pull my thumb out my arse and actually get them finished. So there'll be Architects and Paladins winging its way over to the website as well. And some others, given that I've played a lot of games in the last 30 days. So I have no excuses for shirking my responsibilities.
Excellent. Well, until our next episode, tatty bye.
Ta-ra.
Catch you later.